Thank you for listening to the Dog Trainers Podcast, a podcast created by dog trainers for dog trainers, or anyone who's ever fallen in love with man's best friend.
Hey everybody, welcome back and thank you so much for listening to the Dog Trainers Podcast. Mariano Alvarez here with Brent LaBrada and another very special guest that we'll be announcing in just a second. But first, I do need to let you guys know, as usual, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, all by searching Dog Trainers Podcast, as well as all major podcast platforms. And I want to give some love to some cities that have been showing us some love with our last episode. So shout out to Columbus, Ohio, Nashville, Tennessee, Orlando, Florida, and Scottsdale, Arizona. How are you guys?
What's up, everybody? It's Brent with the Dog Trainers Podcast. And here on the Dog Trainers Podcast for episode 50, we have a wonderful guest, Mr. John Gatta. How you doing, man?
Doing good. How are you?
All right. I'm doing great, man. Thanks so much for joining us on the podcast. Those of you guys who are listening right now, thank you guys so much. If you guys already follow John Gatta, you guys know you can find him at Gatta Train, Gotta Train, Train. You guys can also check him out at www.gottatrain.com. And he's going to tell us a little bit about some of the rescue organizations that he affiliates with a little bit later. But we want to thank you so much for joining us, John. Let's go ahead and jump into this podcast kind of the same way that we jump into a lot of our special guests. How'd you get started in dog training, man?
Ooh, well, it started as a kid. Me and my mother would volunteer at the SPCA, and we ended up fostering a Rottweiler named Hans, and he had some behavioral issues. And pretty much we would go to the training seminars every weekend. And, you know, we taught this dog to catch treats off of his nose, fell in love with the process, started watching Cesar Millan, fell in love with that. I think the struggle I had is when I was 16, I knew I wanted to be a dog trainer, but I let everyone tell me that I couldn't make a living being a dog trainer. So I pushed it under. I became a civil engineer, hated my life, but I still volunteered. I volunteered at the SPCA, and I also volunteered at a parrot aviary with a Moluccan cockatoo named Bob.
Bob the cockatoo.
And just one day, 4 years ago, I decided that I am done with civil engineering, and I decided to move to Arizona to follow my dream and become a dog trainer.
Where were you before that?
What do you mean before that?
Before you said you moved to Arizona.
I was in the Bay Area. So
okay.
Roughly 30 miles east of San Francisco. I'm from a place called Castro Valley, California. And I split my time between San Ramon and Castro Valley, California.
Oh, so you're from Cali. Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
See that hat?
Yeah, I see it, but you know.
Giants.
Yeah. There's some people just wear hats, you know?
Yeah.
Just wear hats.
The only people I feel like is a safe bet that you're actually from California when I see a team hat is like the Sharks.
Oh yeah. Die hard.
Was that a hockey team?
Yeah.
Is it really a hockey team?
Yeah.
It sounds like it. I wouldn't
Never heard of Joe Thornton?
No.
Oh.
I'm one of those dudes.
I gotta go, guys.
Not a sports guy.
Yeah.
All right, man. So talk to us a little bit about, so you were a civil engineer. Did you do that professionally, or is that what you studied?
Yeah. I would. So basically I passed the test. You have to get a 90% on a law test. I passed the test, and I was doing it, had my stamp and everything. And I just hated my life. Right. At first, when you first start off, it's fun. Like it's new. Right. But you know, just doing math all day and looking into a little site all day is not fun.
Got it.
It's like I was literally working 12-hour days and commuting 3 hours 2 times every day. So I would wake up at like 3 o'clock in the morning. I would drive to work in traffic in Palo Alto, right? And then I would work, wouldn't even eat lunch, would come home, eat, take a shower, go to sleep. I didn't even have time to have a dog. And that was my whole life. That's all I ever wanted, was to have my dogs. Right. I still found time to volunteer on the weekends, but it just, that's what I enjoyed is the parrot aviary and volunteering at rescues. Right. And yeah.
And what was it? So like initially growing up, you said you knew you wanted to be a dog trainer.
Honestly, it was Cesar Millan.
Yeah.
Right. I watched his stuff, and everything he did just made sense. Right. It wasn't like all these other people where it's just obedience. It was him using his body, right? Like I feel like I could relate to that guy, right. And then when we started putting his methods into the dogs that we were rescuing, me and my mom, my sister, it worked. And it just became like, just following his little guidance on his TV show helped us help other dogs, like just over and over. And it's not that we did anything crazy. It was never, and even today, oh my gosh, Money Master the Game, bro. I recommend that book all the time, bro. Sorry, ADHD.
I love that.
Sorry. Oh, it's a great book. Hey, there's a quote in there, and he says, when it comes to finance, it's like the rainforest. It's not what you know that's going to kill you. It's what you don't know that's going to kill you.
That is true.
Amazing.
Tony
book.
Robbins, man.
Yes, very good book.
Great.
Sorry. But it, the one thing with Caesar that I loved is it wasn't just paint by the numbers. It wasn't just one size fits all. It was something different for every dog that he saw, right? And the one thing that he was always pushing, get control of that mind, calm that mindset, and watch that dog thrive. Right?
Well, it was cool because we had, it was a couple episodes ago, we had Samantha Johnson in Pack Life LA. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her. She worked with Caesar.
Oh, wow.
And she's around our, how old are you?
I'm 32.
32. So he's around our age. She's around our age. And she straight up worked at the psychology center with him. And
Very cool.
Her first dog gig was just jumping into Caesar Milan gig. Like she just went, can I work here? And they're like, sure. So she has a really cool story. Check her episode out. I think it's episode, what is it? Episode 47, 48?
Yeah, you're gonna
should be episode 48.
Yeah. And she was, I think the cool
am I episode 49?
You're episode 50.
Oh, you're episode 50, man. Big 5-0.
So it's good. It's a good number.
Why you want a 49?
49ers,
I mean, you could be 49. So one of the cool things that we see this echo a lot, right? From Tyler Muto to Blake Rodriguez to Jonas to just a lot. Every dog trainer that's training right now, we owe our careers to Caesar Milan.
Straight up.
You know what I mean?
Straight up. He made dog training cool.
Yeah, he made it cool. He made it cool, and he made it your job as the human, right? It's your job to figure this shit out. And he made, especially for the rescue community, and this will be a good segue. In the rescue community, obviously, there was already spay and neuter back then. There was already dog shelters. There was already a lot of things in place. But I think one of the big things that was suffering and lacking to help homeless animals was education.
Well, it's still lacking right now.
It still is. Right? You're right. And that's going to be more of a cultural perception war, maybe, right? And I think that when Caesar came into the game and started saying, it's not your dog's fault, it's a you fault, and you need to take responsibility, and you need to think how your dog is thinking. He was actually teaching people how to empathize with their animals, right? And how to think. This term dog psychology was developed, right? And we might have heard of it before, maybe from more of a behavioral standpoint, like, behavior studies and, zoologists and things like that. But this idea of dog psychology, to be able to break down ideas of how dogs think to make it more digestible and easier for people to understand. Now, from a dog training standpoint, we kind of see that these two realms. We see that there's like obedience, and then there's behavior. And then, most of the dog trainers that we are interviewing here, there's always a little mixture of the two. Would you say you lean more behavior or more obedience?
I rarely am working on obedience cues, right? Now, if I'm dealing with a puppy, yes, I will go over the basics, right? But generally speaking, when I am dealing with a behavioral case, and that's why I'm traveling all over the place, is for behavior stuff. I work on three base things, right? That crate, place, and come, right? Those are the only obedience things that I really focus in on. That and eye contact, but I don't give it a command. But it's more about how, when it comes to behavior, the dog could have a genetic issue. The dog could be severely aggressive or fearful, but generally speaking, it is something the human is doing wrong or reinforcing that's creating the problem. And generally, when we get those humans to take a hands-off approach to their dog, amazing things happen. Right? I try to get people to give a 2-week reset. Just stop, giving all the affection, except for on walks when things go well, right? Make them earn the food, do some duration work, 4 to 6 hours. If it's a serious case, 4 to 6 hours a day, right? Have that dog on a leash, take away that dog's choice and watch it shine.
Right. And I think that's actually a good topic to talk about because, you know, as dog trainers, there are things that we do that either were taught to us, maybe protocols or things that we fell into that naturally have an influence over the dogs. Like, I'm not a naturally structured individual, but as I was learning dog training under someone, I learned structure and I just literally mimicked everything. And so right now I have about 10 to 15 dogs here at my house, dead silent.
I've seen them.
How is that possible? Yeah. Right. So in the process of dog training, I guess a lot of times we have a hard time explaining to owners, right? So just so you know, this podcast is designed for young dog trainers, up and coming dog trainers, people who are having struggles, maybe finding the right words, finding the ways to approach things, you know. So let me finish my point and I'll let you do that. The idea of no affection, no, don't give your dog the things that you already are going to give them just because it's beneficial. How do you go about navigating?
Okay, I love this question.
Yeah.
So how I explain it to people is in a couple ways. One, you have a girlfriend, okay? If you buy your girlfriend flowers today, she's going to appreciate it, right? But if the next day you buy her flowers again, she's going to appreciate it maybe. But then the next day you bring her flowers again. It's like, okay, great, right? And again. And again and again. When you give all the affection in the world, it becomes not important. Right. When things are, even when you're dating a girl, if you do the most, she's gone. Right. True. Make affection scarce and it becomes the most valuable resource you have, especially with dealing in leash reactivity. Right. I don't like using treats for that kind of stuff, but I wanted to touch on something you said right before that about young trainers coming up in the world, right? It is a very difficult field to navigate. I know when I first started off 3 years, I mean, I've been in rescue. I've always had a thing for dogs. I've always been good with training, but I called almost every single trainer in Arizona and I begged them to pick up poop. Are you allowed to cuss on this?
Yeah, cuss all you want.
So
I
begged them to let me pick up shit to learn little scraps from it. None of them were willing to let me do it. Right. The one guy that did was Dennis of Dogs of Two Wars, at Dogs of Two Wars, was willing to take me under his wing and explain some things virtually, but it was very difficult. And I love that you guys are trying to help the younger generation because the information's not out there. You could do all the research on Google and YouTube. You're just not finding real information. There's so much misinformation that you're trying to sift through. How are you supposed to know where to go?
Exactly. And strangely enough, like we started this last February, right before COVID started. And one of the byproducts, and we just wanted to talk about dog training, right? And we ended up getting some really great people on, and we got Michael Ellis on, and he just said,
"You got Michael Ellis?"
Yeah. Episode something.
We had Michael Ellis, Tyler Muto, Tommy Davis,
Yeah.
Denise Fenzi. We've had a
lot of
Larry Crone.
Larry Crone was on. We got Sean O'Shea on, right? So we got
Jonas.
A lot. Nick Jonas, or not Nick
Jonas.
Jonas.
I talk to Jonas almost every day.
Yeah.
He's my favorite, man.
Yeah,
and
he's fucking hilarious.
But the one thing I talk about with Jonas is the upbringing. People like us, if you look at my arms and my hands, I learned the hard way, right? Because I couldn't find a mentor. Right.
Yeah.
I took some bullshit cert class, but it didn't. I mean, I knew more before I took that class than I.
Right. You just got the paper.
Yes, for the cert.
Yeah.
But it's in the trenches dealing with difficult dogs.
100%.
Like you can see, I have scars. I have stitches in my mouth. I mean, I've learned so much by working with the difficult dogs in rescue. Right. There's no way to learn without getting your hands on difficult dogs.
100%.
Especially when we're doing behavior. Obedience is slightly different, right? You can see and copy, right? But when it comes to behavior, you have to learn. You have to take. I mean, you look at my arms; they look bad. Right? I mean,
he has a horrible tan, guys. If you guys can't see,
horrible tan, yes, and scars everywhere, right? And it's every one of these bites has taught me something. Right now, there are those dogs where you just have to wear the bite. You know it's coming. That's not necessarily a learning lesson, except for the dog.
That's more of a strategy to not get your arm torn.
Yes, but it's that dog. Most dogs will learn that when they bite, they don't get their way, and then they crumble, and then you can do whatever you want. But for the most part, if you're not putting yourself at risk, and I know that doesn't sound safe, right? You're gonna have struggles when you run into that motherfucker, and you know that motherfucker that I'm talking about, right? It's like a dog like my handsome Bob at home, right? Just a dog that has to be managed, a dog that's not going to stop once he starts, right? But you have to get in there and work with those dogs if you want to take on behavior.
100%.